Cool. All right. So, good evening, everyone. Once again, thank you for coming to our next fireside chat. Our next guest speaker is Kamau Vassall. So, Kamau, if you want to introduce yourself first and give us like a bit of like intro of like who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Kamau Vassall. Some of you probably just heard me talk about what I've been up to. Uh, but yeah, in general, I'm here in Austin. I work for Unity during the day. I'm on the multiplayer workflows team. So I'm like creating tools to make developing multiplayer games a little bit easier and less tedious. Um, so I'm actually not even that deep into the engine, though I work for the engine company. And so outside of that, though, I do a lot of game jams. I was just talking about the show that I was on. I do little events around town as well to promote some of my own games. I have 5 games in the store, 5 mobile games. Uh,
Okay.
Almost six. Six will be in a week. Just waiting on some a little bit more art to get the sixth one out.
Okay. So
Um,
you're gonna drop a link for us, right? So we know where to see your sixth game, right?
I I will drop a link when it's ready. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, all my stuff is focused on a cultural. I feel like that's most of us here. We want to like present our
Yeah.
culture in some way. So uh, I have some rhythm swiping games. I have some, and then I have some board games with Caribbean flair. Then the latest one's going to be like a solitaire with Caribbean flair, just because everybody old in the Caribbean plays solitaire. I mean, they all play. I have a Ludi game and I have a Dominoes game, but then like they all play solitaire as well. So I'm like, all right, I gotta do something. I know they're all playing it as well. Um,
Okay.
and then I have also, that's one of my quick projects. I still have some other bigger projects that I'm working on that will come out later. But yeah,
So for,
that's my little spiel.
okay. So for the Caribbean dominoes, can I actually hear like my grandparents like yelling and like slapping the pieces down in the background as I play? Like how authentic?
So I figured that if you play dominoes, your uncle and your grandparents gonna play dominoes, whatever you're playing. So I actually made the game geared around 30 to 40 year olds. So it has a lot. It has like Street Fighter and anime references. So it has like lightning striking the table when you pass someone. So I was trying to convey slapping the table and like all that excitement, but I also try
Yeah.
to make it not uh, I try to make it appeal to like a broader audience, So like um, it has a huge anime references. Like a meteor comes out and destroys the table in one finisher. Another finisher has a Street Fighter, Akira, Akuma. Like the screen goes black and all the punches.
That's good. That's good.
We have the ninja falls out of the sky and punches the ground, and then the domino falls like behind him and explodes like the screen. Like we have all these like cool, nice finishers.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
we have like a badge system. So if you do certain achievements, you can wear these badges, so you can like go into the match bragging straight away. It's like seamless multiplayer, so you can play with people randomly, or you can set up rooms easily with your friends. So it's I try to make it geared to 30 to 40 year olds. Of course, like super young people as well, I guess. But mostly people around my around my age.
Okay. Okay. I might actually did. I'm gonna want to hear more about that later because that sounds cool. Like even outside it, I might have to give that a shot. So, just so the introduction. So since I know not everyone's not a programmer, do you want to give us your like sort of like starting off like personal definition of what a game engine is?
Yeah, so to me, game engines are there's two definitions, or even more. But to me, a game engine is anything that gets you to get your game done quicker. Now, not that may not be everybody's definition. So game frameworks might even be included within that definition to me, uh, because otherwise, game engines are only include things like Unity or Unreal, and they won't include things like uh, Renpai or something like super geared to like an artist that it's almost like it's not quite like Photoshop or something, but it's like geared to like storyboarding or something. And it's like, oh, that's is that a real game engine? It's like game engine is anything that helps you make the game. Uh,
Interesting.
and so that's my general definition. Whereas like the industry might just say like game engines are these powerful tools that let you create any type of game or something. Um, or they might say, there might be anti-game frameworks like Raylib. I'll talk till I'm blue in the face about Raylib. Raylib is like a rendering pipeline, but it gives you the ability to easily do audio or rendering, even a little bit of physics and some other stuff and some networking, right? Which is what people tend to use game engines for, right? Uh,
Right.
so to me, it's all about like anything that helps me gets to the goal and has multiple uh, pieces in it. That's a game engine. So if you're an artist and you want to make a game and you like gravitate to like Ren'Py or like Game Maker, to get it out the door. I mean, that's what it's about. Like you're able to express yourself, you're able to be creative, you're able to do what you wanted to do, and that is the goal.
That's a really interesting definition. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not the most popular definition, but yeah, that's just sort of how I think about it because um, I think also the way game engines are now may change, right? Like the way AI is ramping up, you might see rendering pipelines change. We might see game creation. Like I think I saw something about some game. It just made platformers, from what I can tell, and that's not.
Right.
I mean, there's a million tools that make you easily make platformers, but
Right.
I just saw some new AI thing about platformers, right? And that might be some new avenue of game creation. But game creation is not all about getting a memory layout and ones and zeros and technical stuff. It is about expressing interesting ideas or art in a medium to me. And so whatever allows you to do that, um, to me is a game engine.
I think your definition is really interesting because I feel like like you mentioned, like Ren'Py is included, and then it also includes like Super Mario Maker, like that fits like
Super
within the
Mario
like
Maker,
like
a game that it also makes games.
yeah, and like there's a really ton of interesting things I've seen people do in Super Mario Maker.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and then people might be like, "Oh, that's not interesting or that's boring," but it's like, if you create an interesting enough level with RPG Maker, people will talk about it, and you invoked an emotion of some sort, right? So yes, you are making a game. You're just using a game to do that.
I'm curious, when did you first start to like want to just like dig into like what a game engine can do? Like, what sort of got you into this like mindset?
So, kind of offline, we are talking about like, oh, when I was like 10 or when I was like 15, I was like messing around with like a game maker and RPG maker and all that stuff. And so
Right.
back then, I was not interested at all in the technical parts, right? Like, I was just like, I want to make the game. Uh, and so I guess diving deeper in, as I talk about this interesting definition, as we dove deeper into like, well, what is it that you're actually trying to do and trying to express, and how would you go about doing that? That question probably came up, you know, way more recently. So probably like in my 20s. So like let's say not recently, 10, 15 years ago. Uh
Okay.
Probably around the time I moved to Texas where I started, messing around with Unity, start messing around with some of the engines that I had self-made, quote unquote. Messing
Right.
around with the different tools and stuff like that. And wondering like how does this all work and fit together? And so you can make a game, right? Like you can make a Snake game. People were making Snake on their. Everybody had Snake on their like T81 or whatever, right?
Yep. I
Which
was.
is not
Yep. That was thinking the snake on the calculator.
right. And so you're messing around, you're making Snake on that or whatever. But like, is it an engine or is it an editor? So you could like you could imagine, for instance, that you're messing with Unity or something, and you're trying to build a snake game, and it might actually be kind of difficult. Like, how do I make him longer? This is kind of weird. Whereas, like, but it was very simple on your calculator or whatever. And so, again, I guess there's no engine there, quote unquote, on your TI 81 or whatever. But you might,
Right.
with Raylib, you might make it so that you have an editor yourself. And so was experimenting with like, what is the editor, right? Which is the ability to drag and drop textures in and give them behaviors. What is the command line console? I don't know. Imagine Quake. Some of the older school games have them still, where you kind of hit the
Yeah.
tilde button or whatever, and like this little window pops up at the bottom or at the top, and you can
Right.
like type in a command.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. You can start
y-
scripting. Yeah.
yeah, and like, or you can even imagine. I'm trying to think of a game that's super pop, like Age of Empires. You could even just hit enter and like type in like weird cheat codes and hit enter, and they were using that for debugging. They weren't using that. Um, the cheat codes were just how they were got left in the game from them debugging different things. I need to make
Right.
the economy really big, really fast, but they just hit enter, typed in like pizza something. I can't remember the cheat code, but I used to remember it. Get a bunch of gold and then use that or whatever. So you're like experiment like, all right, so
Right.
like that helps you develop faster. You having a little command console, having a little editor, and I had all these ideas separate out, right? So like Unity, you want to move quickly in Unity, like there's a rigid body, which means you can get physics easily, right? So there's a physics system that you don't have to
Yeah.
write. So I started thinking about all those things, ideas, probably like 10, 15 years ago as they started to coalesce together. And then art pipeline is also really, really important. So like shaders and Unity are really easy to do. If you're an artist, you can drag your
Right.
model kind of out. You can export it from Blender and Maya into Unity. You can almost model stuff in Unity. Knowing how all that kind of works and it being very easy to do means that you have people like uh, I'll name drop like a Thomas Brush or something, who's an artist,
Right.
has enough ability to make now two games in Unity, right? Granted, he did eventually learn how to code, but
Yeah.
just but he's mainly an artist background, right? So you can have artists who are just very familiar with all only art tools, being able to just full on make huge games in the engine. So, yep. Hopefully, I didn't drag on that question too long.
No, no, no. I actually kind of like where you went that because it leads into the idea that like the goal is to like make something interesting and then like convey what your thought and like the experience you want the player to have. Like there's experience that you're going for, and whatever tool best does that job is the one you use. Like naturally, there's certain technical things that are easier to do, and like let's just say like like the big two like Unreal and Unity. But like if RenPy gets the job done, then use it. Like
If you if you can make someone cry with RenPy, then you are more than a game developer, right? If you can
right?
make
Yeah,
someone
absolutely.
terrified, cry, feel emotions, or think about a problems, I mean, I guess RenPy doesn't have a huge problem solving element. You could apply it to it, but feeling emotion is a good one to have in jest of a one about solving puzzles, right? Because games are you can present games in sort of two ways. Hopefully, we're not too off track, but just really quick,
We're
the
good.
one way is presenting uh, a story of emotion and feelings, making them like reflect and introspect on life. The other one is like a Sudoku type of way, like a Sudoku route, which is or wordscape route, which is about the complexities of problem solving and stuff like that. And then like the best games are like a blending of both. Where just like let's say Mario, where you kind of like blend some interesting story elements with those interesting design elements. And platformers are like a physics based problem solving, right? Um, so you're solving interesting problems with a physics simulation with a nice story that makes you feel emotional about Mario and Princess Peach.
Nice. I like that manner of thinking. So I did have a question because you were talking about you mentioned briefly about working on your own. So let's say I'm just like I got a team together and we're considering making our own game engine. is there a time when we say like it's worth making our own game engine? It's not worth it. Like, how do we sort of come to that decision?
Yeah, so to me, there's a mistake a lot of people will make. Um, Opinions are welcome on my hot take, but they stick to one thing, uh, and that is good to a degree because you can get a lot of expertise in that
Right.
thing, and you might be lacking expertise, so you need to stick to that one thing. Um, but it definitely needs to be a little bit less fear of like, hey, I'm gonna just try this new thing. Now, a lot of people I think learned that recently with the Unity fiasco. All right, I'm gonna just
Yeah.
hop into Godot or something now, which
Yeah.
is to me
Yep.
a good thing because now you know, oh, this concept is translated in this engine is this thing. Oh, wait, is Unity doing it too complex or is Godot doing it too complex? What is the frame rate here? Like you can start wondering about those type of things. How easy is it to drag a texture in, and how easy to get a shader up and running? You can like ask those things by allowing yourself to go through that. So game engines inherently, as a product, want to suck you in and keep you in their product space, right? So if you're in Godot,
Yeah.
you have to write in G script or C sharp. If you're in Game Maker, you have to write in GML, or I think it's what's called, which is kind of like
Yeah.
Python.
I was
And
there.
then if you're
I
like in
thought they supported
Unreal,
JavaScript now. I thought they did. I could be
yeah. I
wrong
mean, I
about
did it
that.
last year. It felt very Python-y. It's kind of JavaScripty. You're right, because it wasn't about like the indentation. Um, and then
I haven't
Unreal,
looked
you're
at it
doing
in a
mostly
while.
visual scripting, unless you're a coder, and then you can definitely dive deeper into the C++ parts. Um,
Yeah.
but even the C++ parts, you're and Unity has the same thing, C sharp. They're all trying to force you to be in their paradigm and stuck. And I think that it's not always great because sometimes you want to do a specific thing and then the engine won't let you, and then you're stuck now because you're stuck within that framework. People need to be able to have that freedom to move about, so to speak. And Godot is probably a better example of being able to maybe apply your own thinking and your own paradigm because it is open source and you can change it a little bit better
Yeah.
than some of the other engines that I just mentioned. But they definitely want to suck you in, and so you still need to always kind of be fearless and be willing to switch engines or not use an engine. If you're an artist, it might sound crazy. I'm not asking artists to create an engine, but if you're working with teams already of people, you might and some of them are programmers. Some of that can be done by them. It does feel daunting to create an engine, but that's not what I'm not saying that either because if you use a framework like Raylib, you can I guarantee any programmer, I don't know how many in chat, you can make think faster in Raylib than you ever would in Unity. You can just test that for yourself. You will definitely make a thing like maybe not Pong, but you can definitely make like a snake. Certain types of games, for instance, you can make way quicker depending on how you think about problems and stuff in simpler frameworks, simpler engines. Build out your own console and stuff. Doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
Because if you're spending 3 years on a game anyways, a week of let's say you, oh my gosh, I'm working on this console. It's taking me a week, like a command console or a cheat console. That's like nothing out of like 3 years. Oh my gosh, I'm
Right.
doing a little bit of physics or something, or I want to help my graphics programmer or technical artist do shader code. Um, that doesn't that doesn't take that long. All that's like that's like not the long part of any of the development parts. Um, so yeah, I think people just are a little bit intimidated, but if you were to ever just try it, it ends up not being that bad.
Yeah, I can speak to that myself because I remember, like, for a long time, like, I used .NET at my day job, and then I'm like, oh, well, I don't need to learn a new language. I'll just use Unity. Like, I've already used Unity before. And my friend Nick kept pushing me to try something else, and then they finally got me to try Godot, and I'm like, yo, Godot's pretty thick. And then he's like, see, I told you. Like,
Yeah, and even just trying to solve the problems that Unity, Unreal, or Godot has solved for you will help you understand those tools better, right? Because
yeah,
anyhow, I were to like create a Photoshop clone, I would know how to use Photoshop better, right? So if your
yeah,
programmers on your team know how to make just tried to make their own little physics parts or their own little audio pipeline or a little art pipeline, or again, maybe it shows little box around the collision or whatever. I mean, that's all the
Yeah.
editor, that's all the engine is, right? The ability to see stuff, save the scene, and then I load it back up, and oh, all my changes are there. Once they do that for themselves, they'll know all those underlying systems better. Um, so to some degree, artists and designers should know that, but maybe not the programming parts of it. They might need to know, like, oh, okay, like when I was in this one engine, like the art was way easier. Can you? How long? Everybody sat there, tried to open up Unreal. And if you're not, you spared yourself some pain. But if not, maybe you've tried to open up Unity, and Unity, might take a minute instead of like 30 minutes with like a large Unreal product.
Yeah.
Unity, a big one might take a minute or two. I've seen some take, 5 to 10. If you have a slower computer, let's say you live in the Caribbean, we're both Caribbean. If you have a
Yeah.
slower computer, Unity is gonna take forever. So then you're like, all right, let me just use Godot or something. Then that
Yeah.
will
It's like
help
we
you
go
like,
make
oh
lunch.
wow, this is the faster of both of those, right?
Yeah.
So something's happening here. What's happening? Why is this so much faster? And I guarantee if you wrote one in like C or C++, or just using like monogame and C# or something,
Yeah.
it would open instantly. Like however slow Godot is, which is again way faster than Unreal and Unity. However slow that is, it's gonna be immensely, like every product you can even think of will instantly open if you do it
Yeah.
in C#, just the raw version of these.
Yeah.
Um, and so your development time, how much time do you spend waiting on the projects to open? Um, but yeah. Anyways,
Yeah, and I see what you're saying because it's that like for like a lot of small developers, like if you don't really know how to like customize like the build system in Unreal to get those load times down, you're just spending a lot of time waiting on it to load and build for no real reason. And it's like building things that you're not even using in your game. Where if you had just used like let's say something smaller, lighter, you could just skip all that.
that's true, because like yeah, if you don't know the build setting in Unreal, you're gonna have a little bit longer times. And then if you did know it, you know something that you only know in Unreal. It may not apply to Game Maker, so it's good to
Oh no,
know
she's
a breadth of stuff so you can be like, oh, why is Unreal, like you would already know Unreal might be taking a little bit too long because of you using other stuff. So then you would immediately Google, hey, why is this taking so long? Because I use other stuff. Um, all that stuff is just good general knowledge to know without being too technical.
it's funny because like I had like the list of questions and then you just kind of like blasted through the questions before we even got to them. Like I was like, oh, at some point we should talk about what people in other disciplines do, and then you like already like checked that box, and I'm like, damn.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make sure that I get to the other disciplines because I really think that if you allow me to talk a bit more about that, is yeah,
Yeah, go
I
for it.
think um, like how artists might revere Photoshop, programmers kind of revere their most favorite engine or whatever.
Right.
And so like we get stuck in these paradigms, and so it would be it. Most artists I feel like are way more accepting of different things. They'll download Maya and Blender and Sprite. I don't know how to ever say that correctly. And
Me
mess
neither.
around with all those type of things.
Right.
And I always feel like the industry, if you want to like be more like fast going, you got to be more willing to experiment. Like I think artists do a good job of doing that. Um, and so yeah, I think even artists, like if they're like, I'm kind of like not technical, but I still want to like make games. And I don't know any programmers. Try doing RenPy and try doing uh, anything with a little bit of visual scripting, uh, just to get some of your ideas and know what your programmer might be dealing with, just for your own sake, because that might help you know how to draw art faster or know what problems they might experience. Like I use an animation system a lot called Spine, and
Yeah.
uh, it does good 2D animation, and knowing how that interacts in different engines is really important and stuff. And if you're going to be a technical artist, a lot knowing like how shaders work and stuff like that, all that's really good information. Like technical artists that know how to draw really well and also write shaders, I guarantee you'll get a job in the industry.
Oh, you will definitely. That is a plus one. So yeah, I threw a link for Spine if anyone is curious about the animation tool he's referring to.
A link
What
to
was he?
Spine.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I threw it in the comment section. I already did it.
Oh, you already dropped it. I could drop the link
Yeah, I
too.
dropped it.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Spine's
But
really
in other
good. I use
things,
Spine almost in all my games. Because it gives a sense of skeletal animation, so it blends animations and stuff like that. You could write that from scratch. So that's another thing. Unity doesn't have blended 2D animations, or at least it's very janky and it uses a state machine and all this stuff. Uh, and it's more geared to the 3D parts, whereas you just want like I hit play, it plays these nice 2D animations. That's what I would use Spine for. Because Unity's animation is good for just simple translating in the same spot. It doesn't really work well with rigged bones on 2Ds. And then there's also another animation style called tweening, um, which Unity doesn't do. I don't know if Godot and some of the other engines have tweening libraries out of the gate. And that when I've used them, I haven't seen them out of the gate. So, but maybe they do. So it's
yeah,
good to just know all that stuff, and you would know that if you were like building your own stuff a little bit. Um, and again, I say a little bit. You don't need to like build out the next Unity or Unreal. A lot of people also want to build out full-on game engines and not a game. I don't recommend people do that either. I recommend people build a game, and if it feels too hard to iterate on that game, like let's say you're building a Mario game and you're using
okay,
Raylib, and all you're saying is like, I'm gonna draw the sprites, and then I'm gonna draw a sprite underneath it, that's the floor, and then I'm gonna do a collision check of just like if it's past this X value. I'm trying to keep it very uh, calculus light here. Then
yeah,
it stops, right? You just stop the velocity, whatever. If you try building that, I mean, I just explained it in a couple of seconds. It's just a few variables or whatever, and then rendering the textures. That actually wouldn't take you, longer than a few hours to do if you're a programmer that's probably been in the industry for a little bit. And then the hard part then becomes everything else that you build on top of it, right? And so that's why we use game engines, because we want, you know, better ways of doing stuff. Like, what if the textures are on top of each other? Which texture, like sorting order and stuff like that. Like all these other smaller nuances end up being how you want to talk about stuff.
that actually does lead into my other question I had. So resources for someone who wants to build their own. Are there any that you really recommend? I've heard a lot of things about the book game engine architecture that I have not read,
I
and
should
I'm
have had
glad
some of
no
these
one who's
links ready to go, but it won't take me that long to find some of them. But there's this guy. I'm pretty sure his name's Dave Churchill. Yeah, I found the first lecture number two, Intro to C programming. I think this one goes into a full on engine at the end of that lecture series, and then there's
okay.
also again this part is for the programmers. I'm sorry. There's Handmade Hero uh, and the Handmade Network. I'll just drop the Hero one in. The Handmade Hero
Okay.
Network is just there's artists in there too, by the way, in the Handmade Hero, because it's all about making anything from scratch, like making like this is on a more of the insane scale of like they start off the series by rendering a window without OpenGL, so they're doing software rendering. Like we've all
Boy.
heard of OpenGL
No,
and Direct.
okay. Wait,
Like we
wait.
all know the
These
like
people are
DirectX
talking.
and OpenGL, right? And so it is funny. Like why would you render without that? You know, Unity is using Vulkan and OpenGL. Like Raylib will use OpenGL. Like all the stuff we know of is using OpenGL, DirectX, Vulkan, or something. Why would you
Yeah.
not render with that? It's kind of insane. But they want to go. They go solo. Like they're talking about how to just do the thing with the bare minimums, and then they eventually will talk about OpenGL. But yeah, handmade's like if you want to know how to make a game, you barely ever coded before, you can actually there's a small intros to see in that one as well. But then it goes from that to you eventually make an entire game. So it is actually kind of slow. Like to a programmer, it might be like this is too slow. To an artist, it might be
Right.
like this is too fast. Uh, so there's probably a little bit of a medium ground somewhere. But uh, in general, I would recommend programmers just sit through that one as well, just because um, the Dave Churchill one's faster because it's like a college course, and college course
Right.
they're just like okay, make the guy jump. The
Yeah.
next one we're switching
Draw
game
the
styles.
owl.
We're done here in 12 weeks. Whereas Handmade Hero is like a 3 year, an hour a day type of thing, and so it definitely drags out. But it drags out
Yeah.
because it's assuming that you don't have that much expertise, um, and it just goes so low level. I see a question about Raylib, and did I drop a link to it? Let me go
I did
find.
actually. I dropped it earlier.
I
I
see
dropped the Ray lib.
RenPy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, I see Raylib.
Yeah. I
Um,
tried to drop everything.
so Raylib is a. I'll answer this question real fast, and the quickest way to explain it would be Raylib is a small abstracted layer uh, that sits on top of OpenGL. It doesn't even do DirectX. We've all heard of OpenGL and DirectX, but it's a small layer that sits on top that gives you the ability to render, do audio, do a little bit of like networking, and a little bit of physics. And it's written in C. So the benefit of that is that you can use Raylib in any programming language because all of them bind to C.
Right.
And the examples of how to I'm sure I've spammed it somewhere, like in programming dev or
Yeah. You
resources.
might have sent it to me
But
directly because I remember asking you about Ray lib.
yeah, the ability to render, let's say I mentioned Snake earlier. There's a Snake game in under 50 lines of C. Um, so you can like get a game going in like very like this, including the headers, the comments, like the braces. Granted, some of the for loops are kind of like sketch, but like 50 lines, and it's again, there's a line to just like, hey, what is the X, Y? What is the width, height? Render a square, right? That's one line, right? So there's 50 of those type of lines in some for loops and some if statements. Just like I know how to, it's one line to render something, and so it's a really good library to just like I want to just experiment really fast. Like I've used it in game jams in the past. I just want to experiment really
Right.
fast. And I don't want to be too involved technically with like how does the physics works and whatever. I know how to render X, Y with height. Um, let me just do that. And so it's great because it's again, it's in your face. Like if you're like, hey, I'm learning Python, or so if you're new to programming, it has a binding. You can use it in that language. As well as if you want to do it in C, the benefit there is like you'll be like you'll be way faster than any editor that you use commercially or open source. Like, you'll be able to. I think there's videos of rendering like 100,000 rabbits all jumping up and down, and it
Yo.
does it at 200 frames per second. So
What on earth?
it's insanity. You can do some crazy stuff with that. Yeah.
Just because I really, I think you did a great job of talking about like making game engines approachable for people who aren't engineers. And I was wondering, do you think there's anything that like engineers could do, like just as a collective or maybe individually or as a group, to make engines more accessible for like their coworkers who aren't engineers?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that they could do is, on top of experimenting more, do, uh, and I'm guilty of this too. I do most of my game jams in like Game Maker or Unity, but I do have some usually solo where I do stuff in like Raylib or something a little bit lower, where I can like take advantage. or do little experimentations of like how would my pipeline of just dragging something into the screen and and like textures there now. Uh,
Yeah.
that's that's the type of stuff that you need from your small groups because then you can get things like um, let's name the game like Hades. That's written in C.
Uh,
You can get things like Rogue Legacy. That's written in C or C
okay.
plus plus. C and C plus plus. Practically nearly the same. Not quite, depending on. They might make some programmers mad, but roughly the same.
Yeah.
Uh,
I know what you meant.
and
It's
so
like, no one's here is gonna get mad.
yeah, so that once you do enough game jams in C or C plus plus or some of these lower things, again, that translates into being able to move faster in the big engines or know why they're going slow or slower than you expect. Um, and so I think of, for instance, college campuses are like, hey, it's game day, whatever. And they made you write a small platformer with your own console window to change gravity or something. And then like you hit like Command E. Command E allowed you to like start dropping more bricks in while you're playing, which is what Dave Churchill, like the Churchill one that
Yeah.
dropped earlier, allows you to do. It shows you how to do that. Then people will be so like, oh wow, in in the span of a week, I can like just lay out all my bricks like it's Mario, and like my guy jumps up and down, and like he shoots a Mega Man bullet. You do that all in a week, then it's like, oh, like why do I need why do I even need Godot? Like I can compile the whole like I can it's an editor and a game at the same time almost, right? Like kind of like
Right.
we were talking about Super Mario Game Maker. It's like your own version of that. You're like making the game and playing the game at the same time. I hit save and it saves the levels and changes that I have. That that's way easier than like I don't know if you've seen Unity's. Everybody's had merge conflicts maybe at during a game jam of like, oh my gosh, my scene is having a merge conflict. Well, if
Oh
it's
man.
small JSON or small just text file, not even like JSON, like just key values or whatever.
Yeah.
Block is at position 1, 8. Then all those issues that you run into maybe at a game jam of like merge issues and all that stuff goes away. Everything becomes like way more like how do I just make something really fun? And so that's kind of what you want. You want things to be moving fast and to be
Yeah.
fun, and be aware when like it's overly complicated. Because like you're in Game Maker and you save a scene, it's going to be in a 2D format, which allows you to. I think yeah, last year for the show when I did Game Maker, when we saved the scene, it because it has all the 2D locations of everything, we were able to make like a little radar based on the other level, right? You can like see the outside world with a little radar or whatever. That'd be way more complicated to do in Unity because your scene is in 3D, even for
Yeah.
2D games. So knowing that Unity's core engines in 3D and has objects stored in a 3D manner is important to know as you're interacting with it.
I see what you're saying. That. Ooh, that is interesting. I'm gonna keep that in mind. Um, I know.
And also, you don't even need to save a level if it's Pong or like Snake, right?
Yeah.
Asteroid, like an asteroid type of game, you don't need to save data. But maybe if you're making Space Invaders, you might want to just save. Okay, my units come down in a cool pattern or whatever. You might want to save that per level or something. But some games don't even need to save a scene, and yet you're given something that you don't even need sometimes in these engines, right?
Yeah. So that was everything I had because you basically just kind of like answered some of the other questions before we even got to them. So I'll say we'll open up for
Mm.
questions from anyone else. So if anyone else has something they want to ask before I monopolize the conversation further.
And ask me your artist and design questions. I feel like I still didn't do enough. I probably talked a little bit about the artist stuff, but I probably didn't talk enough about design iteration. I'm willing to talk a little bit more about that stuff.
Like, Tim, come on, you worked at Sony, you working at Brass Line, you gotta have some kind of question about like working in an engine for design and iteration. I know you do.
I mean, yeah, that is the superpower of engines. Engines are I can visual script, or I can, you know, in Unity you can see the button components, right? And then you can just
Right.
say for this game object do this behavior, and you don't have to see the code at all. Like that is the superpower for the designer of the game engine. It's like I don't have to touch the code, which allows you to, if they want to get the right, all right, the slider just right of like how high you can jump, you don't need to see the code. So like all that's just about quick iteration, which is a really good thing when it comes to wanting to deliver very quickly.
Playdate has its own SDK to develop games for. Interesting.
It's Playdate what I think it
Yellow.
is, but the little mini console thing. Yep, that's exactly, yeah, like the handheld console.
Interesting.
I think since we have Playdate, some other engines I forgot to mention are things like the Pico 8, right? So like Pico 8 and Playdate are kind of similar. Someone who's like coded the Pico 8, when they get challenged to like, let me make something for Playdate, they will have no problem. There's another thing that some of the engines have in their midst is like, they're kind of slow sometimes, right? Unreal, being one of the slower ones. And then you
Right.
don't know what your like system requirements are because it's kind of open ended. So you might throw a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff in it, like then it doesn't work on anybody's machine or something.
Yeah.
But if you're working with Pico 8, which is like web browser based, right? It tries to force you, and I think you write it in Lua, which is kind of like JavaScript or Python. It tries to force you to think about how many it assigns a resource, amount of resources for everything in it. So it's good for artists. If you're an artist, you can mess around with Pico 8. It's very lightweight and simple, and again, it works in your browser. You drag in some textures, it starts lowering the amount of resources that you have available, right? And it has a certain like artistic style already because it's yeah, there it is. It has already a type of artistic style, so you might try to match that style. You might drag your textures in. Oh wait, I have too many textures. Maybe I'm not using some of them, and you run out of resources. Oh, I can't. You can't add any more code or textures or audio. And so having game jams with constraints could also be useful, like doing ones with Pico 8. Developing for the Playdate will also help you, you know, realize that you might be blowing an art budget or your code budget or your audio budget or whatever, and that's also a good thing to think about. Um, yeah,
We'll we'll throw in the classics, the TI-83 calculator, Texas Instruments.
right. If your TI 81 can run on, uh, yeah, I feel like a lot of the times we do overcomplicate stuff with modern games, and then
Yeah.
also uh, with that overcomplication comes a little bit of fear of like how much work things are because we like overcomplicate it. Like if you're making some very complex game engine and not a game that's very specific, you might think, oh man, I have to make the animation system, I have to make the physics system, I have to make the particle system, which I didn't even talk about particle systems. I have to make all,
Right.
but like if your goal is to make a specific game, you don't need all those extra systems. And so like you should be a lot less intimidated because maybe you only need like a few things. And if you're thinking about it like for the Pico 8, you might even need less things than that. Playdate as well. Like you do want to like constrain yourself and think about what's fun first before trying to like I'm making a game engine just for fun. I think it's more about I'm making the game and I have these constraints and I have this cool idea and I want them to feel this thing. I think that's the approach that people should be taking.
Okay. So out of all of these like different tools that you've experimented with, which one is like Maybe you might not have like an all-time favorite, but what would you say like you're like top two or top three?
Uh, well, of course, I'm biased, as the same way.
Nonsense.
For sure. Um, no, but Unity has done. Unity has. Unity has done some stuff in the past that it probably isn't the best things. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. I've actually worked for John Ricoletti twice. I worked with him at EA. He doesn't know who I am. In either company. But I worked for him twice, so I've seen it crash and burn twice. uh, from based on some of
So
the
you,
decisions
this
he
man
made.
has gotten your company into the news twice, and you're just like, here we go again.
Here we go again. Yep. So definitely, there's some questionable, mostly financial stuff or just decisions that are just like not the greatest. The thing about Unity, why it's in that top three, if I had to name the top three, uh,
Yeah,
is that it 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 has the flexibility that you need right away, and you can almost create a game without even writing a script very quickly. Like the rollerball tutorial or whatever, it's like just just kind of just make the little cube and then you double click, add script, and then you do one line of like calculus, not even calculus. What is that? Algebra. I'm saying calculus. Like one line of algebra, and then the ball is rolling.
yeah,
Uh, I feel like even with Game Maker and Godot, it's a little bit more steps, a little bit more friction, or a little bit more tied to how they want to do it.
yeah,
And so you might be in Unity and be like, you, Unity is so flexible, you can have everything in one mono behavior, or you could have everything in scattered components. It doesn't have any like restrictions on how you should do a thing. Like Godot has node based, and you can't have multiple nodes, and so you can't do sort of that same type of composition and stuff. Like it sort of limits you. Again, sometimes
right,
limits are good, but
yeah,
yeah, I think to if you wanted to hit the ball and get going, I would still say like Godot is a good way to do that. I don't think people. I Granted, Godot is open source. I don't think people are looking at the source. I think they're just like it's
uh,
open source, it's awesome, but they're not actually looking at the source.
yeah.
So I worry about that a little bit. Um, oh, another thing I haven't talked about is uh, going through something. So, like some of your favorite games, the source code is online, and this is, I guess, more for the programmers. But like Doom's source code's online, and it's like 5,000. No, how many lines of code is it? It's 50. I think it's 50,000 lines. But I'm probably it's you can search for it. It's like no, it's 30,000. It's 30,000 lines of code. The reason I'm saying that number is I'm sure all of us have dealt with a code project that was just like massively larger than that and was not doing
Yeah.
right. And so like it's good to be like, oh, I can make Doom with the command console that it has, all those guys in it, all that complexity, and I in a few thousand lines of code. Whereas when I was at EA working on Madden, that code base was a few million, not even
So
joking.
dear.
Uh,
I know you're not. That's why I'm laughing.
uh, let's see. The Unity engine. I don't know how many lines of code Unreal is. I'm sure someone knows because some of it is a lot more open source than Unity is. But
Yeah.
I mean, Unity's code base is a few million, and that's what's running underneath every game jam game you make with it. Uh, Godot's code base is most certainly larger than the Doom code base. Whatever you write on top of that, you have to add that as the total line to like because there's no engine when it comes to Doom. They wrote it all from scratch. To add
So I
that
can.
on to what Godot already wrote for you in terms of the C++ code that they have. So it just goes to show that it doesn't take that much. You're not you don't. I mean, granted, we're not all John Carmack or something like that.
I was just
But
about to say, I
granted,
was like,
John
yeah,
Carmack.
I just gotta be as smart as John Carmack, and then I can make Doom in 50,000 lines. Let's go.
But let's think about it. Let's humble. Let's be both like, oh yeah, he's a badass, but also like be humble and confident. He's just one dude who wrote it with another dude, John Romero, right? It took a
Yeah,
year
yeah,
to write it, or less, and it's just two. There's just two programmers and 50,000 lines of code. So like, it's not like an impossible feat. So if you have three buddies, right, you and you have access to the Doom source code already, and you don't want to write it in C because I mean C is not the greatest thing, right? You want to write it in C++, you're going to write it in C sharp, you want to use Raylib, right? They had to write all that. They had to write the whole graphics pipeline
yeah,
and everything. There's a million examples of how to write a console editor. Again, the David Churchill. You just go through that. You already have a little platformer thing. You can write Commander Keen and be as good as John Carmack in 1/10 of the time because we just have that historical knowledge now. So yes, it seemed intimidating, but like it really shouldn't be. Um, and so if you want to make let's say you're making an audio or a visual novel game like Ren'Py, you need to use Ren'Py if you're a programmer. Maybe not. Maybe you start with Ren'Py. You and your team start with Ren'Py because you're artist heavy. And then the one programmer is like, actually, I know how to just do this part, make it look really cool. In fact, I was it here. I saw someone post something, a text adventure game. I don't know how long it took, but they said it was a 80-minute game. That's pretty long. Granted, they probably
that's
use an
fine.
engine to do that, but they could also not, right? Because
Yeah,
I think it had like three characters to the left, one character to the right, something scrolling in the background, right? That's just algebra, X, Y, value going up, texture
yeah,
moves, right? Um, and so maybe if there's a programmer on the team, they could take that part over. And then the benefit there is like, why would you even do that though? Because like, Unity or Ren'Py could really do that for you without you thinking about it. The benefit could be that you have a bunch of cool particle effects and a cool shading and lighting
yeah,
system and stuff that really is poppy and snappy. And that's what the artist really, really wanted. He wanted smooth transitions and he wanted really nice fading. Because, if you use an engine, I mean, come on, a lot of Unity games look very similar to each other. A lot of Unreal games look very similar to each other. You can also, so you break out of that mode a little bit. It also might just be not be that hard. You might actually sometimes be able to deliver quicker because um, googling a Unity answer versus googling an algebra answer, which is probably the hardest part of any physics simulation. Assuming your game has physics, if it's just a game like an adventure click game, there's no physics at all. All right, it's just I want to render the texture here, and when they click the button, I want to render a new texture. So it really is like not that much code to do something like that. And you
yeah,
might even be overcomplicating it by being in Unity, right? And
yeah.
so it's just
Oh
all
yeah,
about thinking about the trade-offs of like how fast do I want to go and do it. When you
yeah.
run into an issue creating your own storybook game, writing it yourself with Raylib, I say yourself, you're writing it with Raylib. Um, uh, like what do I run into? And you might be like, oh, this is kind of frustrating. I'm running into an issue rendering this little thing. But like that might be the last once you get past that issue, you might not never hit an issue again. Whereas you might run into some like raw order thing in some other engine. Um, so yeah, there's always just small things to think about, and just yeah, you can go really, really, really fast if you try doing it yourself, maybe.
Yep. All right, take care, Chris. So I got a question from Tim, and I want to make sure we get to it before we wrap it up. Where do
Well,
you see development going towards the future, as far as like top engines and tools developers are using, based on like what you're seeing instead of like the evolving landscape, or just like people's opinions with like tools?
well, it depends on a few different things. It depends on web. WebAssembly a little bit. It depends on WebGL a little bit. So like the future of web games is kind of in flux a little bit. It also depends a little bit on the AI stuff. People's attitude
Right.
towards it are very divided right now. Some people
Right.
are like, this is amazing. I can make a game very quickly. And again, it's just a tool, and if you can evoke an emotion with the tool, I'm kind of fine with it. On the other hand, what data is it trained on? What code is it trained on? Like, what is it like? Is it stealing stuff? Basically, was what it comes down to, and so
Right.
that's the big concern a lot of people have. Um, and to some degree, it will displace the utility of programmers, designers, and artists. Um, it will just if I'm using if everybody switches tomorrow to using Super Mario Maker, then a lot of Unity people will be out of a job, right? Um, if everybody switches more and more to engines or AI stuff in general, smaller engines. There's engines that I haven't named. Um, I think I mentioned Mono Game. I'm trying to think of another obscure one, Coco 2D or something. Like there's the
Yeah.
smaller ones will start dissipating, right?
Right.
Allegro. There's one that I haven't thought about in a while. SFML and Allegro will disappear. Everybody will be like using the Raylib or SDL 2 or something for 2D or something.
Right.
As more and more AI and stuff starts taking over. Um, so there is a little bit of risk, but I guess is how much do you want to express your ideas and emotions and give people interesting problems to solve. I think that's the most important thing, anyways. And the way we do it, I just want people to do it in the fastest way. Uh, is what I would say. Fastest way with most interesting way.
Yeah. I will. Well, if anything happens to Unity, I'm gonna make sure you get that Raylib evangelist job because like you're doing a great job selling it. No,
I hope I am. I hope I am.
no. You definitely. I'm gonna check it out. 'Cause that's like from what you've been saying is like all right, like 50 lines a day. It's like okay, I gotta look at this.
Yeah, you can do a hello world where it just renders a black background with white text saying hello world. And I think it's like 7 lines, depending on the language. Like, because you have to import Braylib on the first line and then main function and then create window, draw text, and then close window or something. Like, it's
Right.
very, very straightforward.
Gotcha. So I will say thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. I've definitely learned a ton from talking to you. Also, and then everyone else, thank you so much for coming, man. This has been great. Oh, that's the one thing. If you want to drop your social email, if anyone wants to like reach out to you.
Oh yeah. Let me. What should I? Should I drop my games or my socials or both? Let me
Both.
drop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
drop both. Drop Caribbean
Do
Dominoes.
my Twitter and then let's do my. I've not had to drop this in a while, so I'm like blanking on how to do it.
You're
Sure.
gonna be at
There's
GDC by any chance?
I am not. The last time I
Okay.
went was like 4 or 5 years. I went before the pandemic, like 2017 or 18,
Okay.
and I didn't really get that much out of it. But I
That's fair.
feel like um, if I like 10 years prior to that, me going there, had I gone there, it'd been like mind blowing.
Right.
But I already had done so many like E3s and like there was also an
Oh.
Austin game developer conference. And by the time
Oh,
I
okay.
went, it was mostly I'm just like listening to. I was going just like I don't know fanboy on games,
Yeah, that's fair.
which is what people go to learn and like network.
Yeah.
How do I?
Yeah, I was gonna do a shameless plug for the other Black and Game Dev events while you're there.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh, I click on
Yeah,
this. There
I
it is.
think your link tree has everything. Yeah, it's got all your games, and I think it has your Twitter as well. When I looked at it, I thought it did.
Yeah, I might have my Moonlit Twitter.
Cool. All right. Well, Thank you once again. Thanks everyone for coming, and this has been a great fireside chat. Everyone, have a good evening.
All right, thank you for doing this and getting this organized.
Yep, not a problem.